This is a guy in the den, and today I am talking about Chill of Ravenloft. Well, this is the latest expansion, the 10th, I believe. I don't really know how you measure this, if this is going to be like a mini expansion or if that concept even exists anymore. Since we seems to have the annual expansions, and at some point there was like major expansions like Menace of the Underdark, and then there were mini expansions, Salt Marches? I don't know. Whatever is the case, this is Chill of Ravenloft, the latest one. And I wanted to make 3 parts out of it because as I have recorded stuff, it's hard to truncate all the different quests and go through those and then add the public area and talk about that in a way that makes sense. And then, of course, the wilderness and a kind of summary of everything. So this is going to be 3 parts. I'm going to roughly make them about a half an hour to 45 minutes each. And that's going to be it. That's going to be the complete guide or a complete walkthrough of what Chill of Ravenloft is about. So here we have the public area. This is what you can find once you go from the first quest and then walk into the wilderness. And then you locate this place. It's kind of like, I don't know, train station, a parliamentary house, something like that. And what you have here is you have the usual, which is like a tavern, and with all the different trainers, because this is a level 8 and a level 34 setup on legendary. Well, technically, if you run it on elite, it's 38, level 38, but you know what I mean. So we're talking about 36 then. But anywho, here you have the Saga representative. The unique thing with the Saga representative right now is that you get the Dark Gift. So it has the usual and rewards of materials, and then of course some other stuff, and the Dark Gift. Also enhancements of the Dark Gift. So you can first get the Dark Gift, get that situated by praying at the altar, and which I'm going to show you in the wilderness. And then you can enhance that Dark Gift to kind of lower some of the bad effects of those Dark Gifts, because each Dark Gifts have a beneficiary and not so beneficial effect to it. You also have all 13 quests here. As you can see, I've done a couple of ones, a couple of times actually, and I have a few more that I need to do now on my next round for the end reward. And that's pretty much just here. Now the actual quest givers is part 1 and 2. And this is not structured the way you would say in Mist of Ravenloft, where you pretty much just had one guy to talk to, and then they will point to a quest, and then you could take a teleport to that quest somewhere in the wilderness, and then come back, talk to a guy again, and get the next step in the quest. In that one, you have 3 small public areas. Here you have a medium-sized public area where everything is self-contained. And unfortunately, I have done all the quests pretty much in the wrong order. You will also see from when I go through each quest that that's actually true. I followed a list that I thought was in order, but I realized when I started doing Locked Down or Locked Away, Locked Away Part 1 and 2, that I hadn't really done Cold Snap yet, which is where you discover Elise. And you do some other quests before that in order to understand that there's something called Elise, etc. That's all going to be revealed in a different quest. And we also, of course, have a bank right there. And we have the general vendor and auctioneer right there. So everything is self-contained in one single area. This is not a large sprawling thing like Evening Star or what is another one? I would say Isle of Dread is probably, as far as I understand it, one of the largest, most sprawling. But you also have all the different areas kind of self-contained where you have all the quests in one location and then spread out. The trainers very far away. The raids in a different area. It is very spread out. The smallest, most self-contained is probably when it comes to expansions, Mists of Ravenloft. And then there's various sizes. Vecna Unleashed didn't even have wilderness as far as I remember it. It was just, you went around in a circle, you took the quest, and then there was a raid. So this is by far, I think, the most self-contained in a good way. You had the patrons for the Keepers of the Feather. And then, of course, you have the Spirit Binder altar, which is not in the tavern. It's actually on top of here. Now, the most important part, and which I'm going to spend the most time on, especially in here, would be the new crafting. And this is, in my opinion, really the conversion of several different systems. I can briefly mention kind of how that goes. But it's primarily the end result of all that into the Isle of Dread system. And then the breaking up of all the set bonuses into the Myth Drannor system. So, I'm not going to go into a long spiel about stuff. Oh, that's the wrong one, isn't it? Here we go. So, most of the items are built on two things. Green steel, more the legendary kind over the heroic, but heroic is a translated into the legendary green steel system. And you will know that because most of the effects that you can add to something like this is gonna be effects that you could find on green steel. Now, this has been changed a little bit because with green steel, you had a blending of two different elements, right? In order to give you some kind of guard or proc feature. One of the proc feature from the legendary steel would be the 1,000 hit points, temporary hit points. Or it could be what was called salt, I think, which is just a proc of, was that the acid one? I'm not entirely sure. Or was it the untyped? But a lot of those different ones have been translated into actual gems that you can add on slot into weapons. And of course, you have a number of other things. Like if you look in the Isle of Dread Claw slot here, Iridescent Claw, it's a 149 equipment bonus to acid spell power. So all of that has been translated from a few different systems. You also have the Augment system. Augment system first came into play with Epic, the OG, the original Epic kind of end game feature at level 20. So they added augments. The augments were not that good, but for that time and for that kind of equipment, it was the best, right? They added certain features. Then they went away with Menace of the Underdark, the first expansion pack, and they started with this thing where you had normal, hard, and elite items. That was not a good system necessarily, but of course it was better than what we already had. And it was the first time we could started coming across higher stats than 6. Keep in mind, you started having stat like strength 6 back at level 11. And it was that huge gap until the epic, the revamp of how epic works for level 20 to 30, for example. Starting with Menace of the Underdark, where you're starting now seeing +7 items. So that's a massive gap between 11 up till 20 when you can finally start seeing stats that are higher than that. It is possible that there was some +7 stats with some of the epic level stuff. Like, Chronosphere? Was that the one? Maybe. But whatever changed with level 20 to 30 is that eventually they revamped the system over and over, unfortunately more than once, so that in Epic Giant Hold, when that was translated into Epic, augments came back, but now they had augments that were level capped. So at a certain level, the stat increased. It wasn't refined in a way. It was almost like they were catching up to that level. I think that was what, level 26 or something, 25, where the Epic Giant Hold started coming out on the scene. So a lot of the augments were kind of still revamping up to that. No one had thought seriously about how to stretch this to whatever is the end goal for the level cap with this game. I mean, currently, as the way I have revamped the equipment system, the sky is the limit now. So that's a good thing. But that was all kind of crashed with the second one, Shadowfell. Shadowfell did increase some of the items, plus auto-granted some powerful items too, just for finishing off a quest pack. And that more or less ruined all the different items that came under it, including the just revamped Giant Hold, Epic Giant Hold. But a little bit further down the line, you started seeing the realignment where instead of having the Holy Burst and the Holy Storm and the Holy Nukes and the Holy Inferno type weapons, they understood that you couldn't just come up with a new name for things and push it that way. Instead, they level the equipment field, so to speak, by tying it to specific levels. That a stat increased so many levels, a damage die increased so many levels to what we have today. So there are going to be a lot of different items between 20 and I would say 28, when I think they more or less finalized how they wanted to have this, that are still not revamped. Like the entire Menace of the Underdark is really not revamped or fixed. A lot of lower end packs with Nate items got more fixed and re-released as with the new kind of item scheme. So this, like we're looking at now, which is the Lamordia type item equipment sets, is a evolution, I would say, first of all, of the Augment system as it existed back level 20 and then got revamped at Giant Hold. It is also a system that have fixed some of the problems with green steel by making it a more simple system with 5 different materials, which has a much better translatability compared to the weirdness of how you did with green steel. Like you had 2 different elements, you mushed it together in a special order and got certain procs. Now it's just 5 different elements or 5 different materials. In this case, they are called things like the Melancholic and Dolores, but if you look, for example, at the Isle of Dread, it was Scale, Fang, Claw, and Horn. Again, they're direct translations between the Isle of Dread and the new Lamordia equipment scheme. There are no weirdness. So if you look from the beginning with the heroic green steel, that was further refined in legendary green steel, but it was also changed from the system called Slavers. Well, not Slaver Crafting. So Slavers was a quest pack, or I would say that it was kind of like a mini expansion, similar to how they did with a few other ones before that. Like Temple of Elemental Evil was in between expansions, so to speak. And with that equipment scheme, Slavers, you were able to bake your perfect item, pretty much like this one, or even that one, which just have those slots with it. Slavers allowed you to then also bake in the set bonus. Very much like if you look at this one, set bonus is Echoes of Walking Ancestors, but it is one that you're added to that. It even included with slavers special named items, like something like this one, Legendary Walking Ancestors Helmet, which is not slavers, I'm not saying that, but it was a regular named item that had a set bonus, and then you baked in a set bonus gem for the other blanks, like the chains and the shackles, etc. And that became your specific unit. So you could have something like a melee guy that you also had multi-leveled for something with spellcasting. So maybe your set bonus wanted to be something to do with spellcasting, as opposed to be something that just melee, right? So being able to put your set bonus on items, regardless of what they traditionally would be for, such as enhancing a fighter or something of that nature, like a vanguard, then you could have more of a spellcasting ability to enhance the few levels you might have in, say, warlock. Again, that was the beauty of the slavers. And I do believe with the legendary green steel, they realized that people didn't like that necessarily, that system. It was too messy. And it was better to have a pure system that allowed you to do whatever you want. Along comes Isle of Dread, which is, in my opinion, a distillation of all those different systems that came before it and works beautifully. You have those fang, scale, claw, and horn slots, which takes a lot of that from other systems, such as slavers and legendary green steel, translates it into a gem that you put in what is essentially a augment slot, right? Slavers, when you pretty much baked an item, you can't take stuff out of it, as far as I understand it. But with the change of this system, you could. So if you look at other system that toyed around with this, like the shadow crafting, there was armor and weapons, right? Then legendary green steel was accessories and weapons. And now you have a combination of all those other systems that translated from slavers, legendary green steel into Isle of Dread items. One thing was different though. As I mentioned, these ones have set bonuses. And set bonuses are kind of messy because it requires them to create a number of different items that need to kind of work together. The item schemes becomes really wide because you have to have so many different set bonuses to do certain things. And as you can notice from this set bonus, while it is perfect for casting warlock, spell DC, imbue, and ability scores, it also includes tactical DCs and assassinate, not something that's very useful for this particular warlock type. Enter Myth Drannor. Myth Drannor added something that was a step back from the Isle of Dread, in my opinion, because I do think a lot of people didn't like necessarily this. It didn't translate well into replacing a lot of different items, given the fact that having been heavily invested in an awesome system like Isle of Dread, removing pieces and adding pieces, but at the same time not being able to find a similar amount of items to do that kind of set bonus. Yeah, I don't think people like that. They didn't want to go back to mediocre named items just because you can put your own set bonus spin on it. So what you will see, and I'm sure everyone that watches this video knows already, you have the sun and you have the moon augments, depending on what kind of slot type it is. Then, of course, you have the ones that have no sun and moon augments, like the rings. Don't get it, but whatever. In these ones, these are set bonuses broken into its individual pieces, with a little bit difference. Because if you have a set bonus like this one, which makes it hard for me to translate this into like a Myth Drannor item piece set, is that you have something like +3 artifact bonus to all tactical DC, +3 artifact bonus to all ability scores. You will notice that when you look at the Sun and Moon augments, they're broken into individual pieces instead. So instead of +3 artifact bonus to all ability scores, it's +3 artifact bonus to a specific one, like charisma. So there's naturally a benefit to have to all ability scores, because constitution is good to have a warlock. It's good to have intelligence and wisdom because that helps with saves. That's why it's hard for me to take all that I invested into this to have these set bonuses and then translate it into roughly something else. And that is the difference now with the Lemordia, is that it allows you to have this kind of setup, like these items that has a similar scale fang claw horn translated into Lemordia, and then at the same time being able to do moon and sun augments, like you can look at this one. So this is legendary Gravekeeper's Greaves. Okay, now there is, I do believe, Boon Isle of Dread boots, right? But I already had one minor artifact, and that is the Bone Ring. So it was a little bit harder for me to, since you can't have more than one minor artifact. Now with this one I used to have, which was a level 26 legendary green steel piece of boots with 3 different things baked into it, which was as a spell crit damage, just like you see here. The reason why I couldn't translate it into now using the legendary Gravekeeper's Greaves is because the total amount of that level 26 legendary green steel boots came to be the same amount as 2 of the Lemordia, like the Melancholic and Dolores translates into. So the other one's going to have, I do believe, 20. And then it has insight bonus of 10. And then a quality bonus of 5. But as you can see, this is 23 enhancement bonus and 12 in insight bonus. So that translates into the same amount as I had before. But now I have the benefit of augment slots. Now I do believe with the green steel you can also bake in an augment slot. I just didn't do it because at the time the raid was pretty much dead, and I just didn't feel like it, to be honest. And I also, of course, have other things like quality fortitude, which is not necessarily the biggest on a warlock. Insightful fortification, which is nice. And I have an moon augment slot. I just haven't found a suitable gem to put in there that can add at least +4 in charisma, because I do want to have more charisma. This is a warlock after all. But it allows me at least to replace some of the older items. This one I can't replace, I noticed, because it has Insightful Spell Pen, Spell Lore, and Radiance Lore. All the things that I can't really find similar items to replace it with. So this one's going to have to remain for a while. This one I can't really... I don't want to replace it, to be honest, because it has Insightful Corrosion and Impulse and Combustion, which I don't use much of, but at least Impulse and Corrosion. I haven't baked in an Isle of Dread Fangs yet, because I do believe that I'm looking to do something like Radiance crit damage. So that is what I next want to do with this item. I might be able to get rid of this. I'm not sure if I can find a similar one for the Melancholic or the Lemordia system. Not sure. When I was looking through the list of bracers, there was nothing there popped out like, oh yeah, that's a perfect thing to replace with. And of course, I'm not going to replace any of these ones. These are the raid versions because they're attuned and they're already built out, all the features that I want. And there's really nothing in the new Lemordia setup that is that much better. It has slightly increased stats on certain things, but not to the point that I want to go through all of this. So instead, I'm going to work on my Vanguard, because I do believe that I can get him a little bit better up there. He has a lot of duplication of some of the quality stuff, And I would like to see if I can just diversify that a little bit and add a couple of sun and moon augment slots just to make it a little bit better. Just slightly better. Just teensy weensy. But that's pretty much what it is. The new system is a beautiful stepchild between the Isle of Dread system and the Myth Drannor in the best of ways. Now, when I look through all the different equipment that you can get and find, I did find some that are very interesting, but it doesn't translate into this one that much. The Vanguard, I have to look a little bit more. I do believe I can find a couple ones. And also for my third alt, which is an Artificer, I bet I can find a number of things. I am curious about the different rune arms, because I honestly extremely disappointed with the bone rune armor. I think it's from the raid. It's not that good, in my humble opinion. And here's the system itself, which is, again, a direct translation from Isle of Dread, so you're not going to find anything that's like, wow, that's different and new. It will just be slightly higher stats on most of the stuff, because you're going from level 31 to level 34. But that it is. It's 9 pages of just things that do the same thing here, but a little bit better. I'm going to show you a couple of items that I actually found and just cap this conversation out, since I've spent so much time blabbing about what was and what is now. And I have found a couple of these things. So let's go ahead and resort this for level 34, or yeah, there we go. So I don't have to look at heroic stuff or any of the other things that are irrelevant. So here we have, this is the one that I pulled just recently, but I realized that I can't really replace my necklace as much as I want to, because it has that insightful stuff. It might be later on where I can find another item that has insightful when I can finally do so. But it adds power to pact, so that's more pact dice. I'm a warlock, yay. And then a couple of Lemordia slots, which is nice. And of course the moon augment slot. Then you have this one, which is improved deception and quality assassinate. I really don't have anything that I would like to put it on. Maybe I could do that on, if I ever do an alt that's rogue levels or assassin or anything like that. But honestly, nothing special. Then we have the legendary sovereign coin, which is exceptional seeker, exceptional luring skill bonus. I really honestly don't like that combo because exceptional seeker sounds like more of a bard, a fighting bard. And then alluring skill bonuses, that can be good for anything that uses that kind of thing. Sure, intimidate, right? So plus 10 exceptional for intimidate, but I don't really have a tank fighter. I have more Vanguard, which is half tanky. But it has a sun augment slot, so that's always something. And I'm using right now a trinket slot on the Vanguard that's kind of on the old side. Is actually from Slavers. Then you have this one, Insightful Potency. So that's nice. On any other caster, guys. Then we have this one. A tiny brain in a tiny jar. Intelligence, skill, exceptional bonus. So that's nice. I'm thinking strongly to put that on my Artificer. But he already has something that is a little bit... has to do with his abilities as far as... unlocking and finding traps and whatnot. Then you have this one. So these legendary Grey Keepers, they're going to be very similar to each other. It's just that you have one that is a cloth, and then you have a light, then you have the medium and the heavy. And I think they all pretty much have the same thing. And that's the one that I have right now. On my Vanguard, I decided... Oh, actually, I have it on this guy, the Warlock. For some reason, I pulled two. I like that one. The design of it is kind of like a bowler hat. I just can't replace for the set bonus, the 3-piece set bonus I have on this guy. But I might find something that's suitable for my Vanguard maybe, or my Artificer. The Vanguard is already using Vecna Unleashed 3-piece set. So again, that might be a little bit harder. Then you have the Stoic, Ram's Might. I thought that was interesting. I do believe there are a few, maybe 1 or 2 items too, that have permanent benefit from spell of Ram's Might. So that one can actually be interesting. But again, on my Vanguard, I have the Vecna Unleashed 3-piece raid loot. Here we go. Great pieces, heavy. SSE, good luck, and natural armor bonus. Nothing special. Then we have that one. Now, there was an orb that I was kind of interested in because it had, I think, Radiance. But this one would work great with if you go over to the Dampier version of the Warlock. I would assume, because that has to do with nullification. So that's not bad. And plus, of course, necromancy focus. And then you have the Docent, same thing. You have Brawler Garb, then you have that. So I pretty much have all of those. And then, of course, you have the Miner's Reinforced Belt. I'm using a slightly different one because I do have a lot of Armor Piece and Profane Combat Master. On my Vanguard, I found another one that adds some kind of Fury attack. This one is the Legend of Frostworm Tooth Ring. Where did I get that from? It is really not that interesting, to be honest. This is not a will plus 13. You can get something similar on something that has universal saves. Proof against poison. No, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to be nice. And then we have this one, Quality Acid Absorption. That would probably be good to have when you're fighting that Hydra. But it's just Quality Acid Absorption. I would assume you will back it up with other absorption items. Then we have Frostwell, which is Glaciation, Spell Penetration. So this one is pretty good. I do believe there's a Radiance version of this one. That one adds, of course, Spell Penetration, but instead have Radiance, Quality Radiance. I think so. I'm not entirely sure. And then more of the medium armor. And then another legendary Sovereign Coin. And then this one is a Sightful Dexterity. Now there's an odd pairing here that normally I would like to have. If they are going to do Legendary Lemurian Cap, I wish they could do one for each individual thing, like Dexterity, Charisma, Intelligence, and whatnot. They haven't done it here. It doesn't cover all the different stats. It just covers half of them, and then I do believe you can find it on other things also. So the Charisma, plus 7 Charisma, that's on a different item that I was maybe trying to pull. But yeah, there you go. Here are some of the Lemordia items. There's still a bunch of them out there that I haven't pulled. And I'm, of course, curious how the raid is going to be. Because that one, I hope, is going to be similar to Isle of Dread, where it completes it to have more of, like, the Cloak here, which is more of a regular item, but it's more of a blank, so you can do whatever you want with it. And same thing with the armor. I want it to be similar to this kind of armor. That would make sense. I might even consider wiping out what I have on my Vanguard right now and start fresh with that, especially when I can build my own set bonus in that case. And that's it. So that's about this public area. That is a little bit about the crafting system, my thought behind it. And this is fully adequate when it comes to a public area. You have everything consistently in a medium-sized area without having to run all over the place to find stuff. I appreciate that. Public areas shouldn't have to be in a game itself. It should be very self-contained, in my opinion. Nothing wrong with something like Evening Star, but Evening Stars is also kind of like the start of so many other things. And I do wish that they would take the Menace of the Underdark kind of worlds that were created, we're talking about 4 separate wilderness and build out more from them just because it makes sense. Now, Shadowfell is built out of Evening Star 2, but in certain other areas. So I would really like for them to utilize the existing wilderness they have created consistently and then add a little bit more to it. I would have appreciated, I do believe, if they used Mists of Ravenloft as a staging ground for this one instead of a whole new area within the Ravenloft universe. I really want to have more of a combination of things to be contained within the different universes that makes sense to me as a launching point instead of all new launching points all over the place. But, you know, other people's opinion might vary. I just like to have the consistency of things. It just feels like you're in a continuous universe in that case. So, that was the first part. Discussing this thing. Now, let's go and check out all the quests. 13 on. Remember, they're not going to necessarily be in order, but I'm going to talk about what I think about them, which ones I truly like, and some that were on the weaker side. And of course, we are going to cap that off with a conversation about the wilderness. I'll let you see me stumble around with a couple of purples. And then finally, a summary.